name is Claudio. The purpose of this video is to provide tips for modifications to yoga poses to accommodate poor flexibility, as well as to talk about modifications to help protect your wrists during various yoga poses. So, to accommodate poor flexibility, the main modification is to make use of a prop like this. This is called the superblock. It's an oversized yoga block. It's 6 inches by 9 inches this way by about maybe 12 or 15 inches this way. So when I sit cross-legged, because I have such poor hip flexibility, I actually position this superblock such that I'm 9 inches off the ground. And so I can sit comfortably, cross-legged and maintain the height of my knees such that it is either even with or below the level of my hips. Now, if you're not quite as non-flexible as me, that is, you have a little bit more flexibility than me, you could go on to the 6-inch height side and be only 6 inches off the ground and sit comfortably. And I like this block because it's just bigger and it's just a lot more comfortable when you're sitting on it than the small, normal yoga block. The other thing that this block is good for is to do pigeon pose. So for me to do a proper pigeon pose, I actually need to, again, be 9 inches off the ground. So when I do a pigeon pose, I use the block this way, and in order to protect my knees, I keep my ankle very flexed, so that reinforces, tightens the ligaments and the muscles around the knee joint to help preserve it and stabilize it. And the other thing that's important is also to keep the bend in your knee less than 90 degrees. So 90 degrees kind of torques it, at least for me. Feels like it torques it more. So I tend to keep my ankle tight, flexed tightly, and my knee bent slightly less than 90 degrees, maybe like 70, 60 degrees or so. And then you could do a pigeon pose. So the other thing that I use this block for is when I want to do a seated forward bend. And in addition to the block, I actually use this strap, which I find to be much better than, more versatile than a standard strap that has a buckle, because it has these pre-sewn loops in it, including a loop on each end, so I could put each loop over each foot and basically do a forward bend. And again, I'm elevated to accommodate my lack of flexibility in my hips, and this allows me to do, I could basically grab the loops wherever I want to grab them, either close up like this, or further back, and I could keep my lower back straight without having to bend it. I could bend my knees a little bit too, and I could do a forward fold comfortably. The other thing that this strap is useful for, among other things, is child's pose. So again, I lack flexibility, I have very tight hamstrings, and so when I do a child pose, I struggle to be able to grab my feet to pull them down. And so what I'll do is use this strap so that I could reach, so I don't have to actually reach all the way up. Because as you can see, this is about as far down as I could bring my thigh, because I have such tight hamstrings. And so this way I can do a child's pose and be very relaxed and not be struggling trying to reach my feet. And and my thighs come down as far as they come down. I could do the normal child pose thing just very, very comfortably. So that's that. So that's it for modifications to accommodate poor flexibility. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was preserving your wrists. There's a lot of yoga poses where you're on your hands, downward dog, just kneeling poses where you're on your hands, and it, can eventually affect your wrists. So one modification which is basically described a lot in many yoga videos is to basically distribute the weight across your entire hand and put a lot of pressure and press really hard down at the tips of your fingers so that you're not basically concentrating all of the force on the palm of your hand, which is a natural tendency. So if you're not paying attention, you'll tend to relax your fingers and all the weight will be in the palm of your hand just below your wrist joint, and that ends up putting a lot of pressure on the wrist. So if instead of doing that, you just press down hard at the tips of your fingers, so now you're using your fingers and you're basically not putting all the force down at the palm, you're distributing across your hand. So that's one modification you could do. The other one that I tend to do, which to me works even better, is to use, to rather than be on your hands, to be on your fists like this. And, basically, push-ups on your fists is a common, exercise technique. So it's, I basically got the idea from that. So that's another thing you can do. And so I'll tend to do plank poses on my fists. I'll tend to do sometimes a vinyasa, upward dog, on my fists. Any kind of a pose. Any pose where you're on your hands and knees instead of putting your hands down like this, you could be on your fists. Now, I'll tend to alternate because sometimes being on your fists a lot like this will tend to irritate your knuckles, the skin on your knuckles. So you could go back and forth and just switch back and forth. The other pose where I tend to like to use my fists is, I forget what the heck this pose is called, but it's a pose where if you do it normally, you're on your hands like this, and you come up like this. And this seems to be particularly tough on your wrists. So this one here I'll tend to do on my fists. It's a lot more comfortable. It doesn't really seem to affect my wrists at all. So that's it. Those are the tips, both for flexibility and to help preserve your wrists. Hope it's been helpful. Have a great day.